Friday morning, I did what I often do on Friday mornings. I rode my bike on the bike trail north as I was heading to camp. And man, was it foggy. My glasses were so covered in moisture that they became useless. My helmet dripped water. My tires, because of the water, all the water got covered in dirt and pollen. My legs likewise were saturated with water, and they too collected all kinds of dirt and pollen. My visibility on that trip was really quite limited. Murky was the experience of the morning. And as I was writing, as sometimes where I do my best theological work, I reflected on how murky I was feeling as I was approaching the preaching task for today, in part because the biblical texts as a whole are not uniform in their message. The individual texts go in what appears to me to be confusing and conflicting directions that can be classified with words like easy versus hard, complex versus simple. And I wanted to go down one or the other of the paths. I wanted to say, because of Jesus' words in Matthew, and Paul referenced those words, it's all quite simple. But Jeremiah, as he talks about prophets, and Paul in Romans, as he tests our brains with complex and fancy theological footwork, made that conclusion inadequate. So then I thought, I'll go down the path, it's complex. But then I was troubled by Jesus' words in Matthew that it's all really quite very simple. The call is not to fanciness or some theological majesty and amazing theological conclusions. The call is to simple, compassionate human action. So, which path shall I go down? It's all quite simple and easy. I like that one. Or it's phenomenally complicated. I want to eliminate the tension. I don't like tension. Never have. I grew up in a household where there was frequent tension between my mom and one of my sisters. And I often saw my role as the young boy in the household to eliminate the tension. Eliminating the tension makes life a lot easier. It makes preaching much clearer because you'll leave here going, he said this, and it's quite clear. Who likes fog anyway? A reality that is a consequence of the tension between warm and cold air. Murky seems like a bad choice. So, what shall it be? Easy or complicated? Simple or complex? Today, I'm going to resist what comes naturally with my personality. I'm not going to resist the tension. I think I'll take the road less traveled. I'm going to go down both paths. Let's start with the hard road, since Jeremiah takes us there, as does Paul in Romans. Jeremiah takes us to the very tough road upon which prophets must travel. The reading for today reflects a conflict between two prophets. The prophet Jeremiah on the one hand and the prophet Hananiah. And Jeremiah in this lesson is taking on the prophet Hananiah, whom he thinks is soft-pedaling the problems Israel is facing in light of the Babylonian invasion. Hananiah is saying that the exile, and this was caused by the Babylonians, is going to last only 2 years. And then the fancy vessels and the decorations are going to be returned to the temple. That is to say, the temple that was destroyed is going to be rebuilt and used again very soon. Now, maybe you can relate to me, but when COVID began, I remember hearing what some thought were the prophets of doom and gloom tell us that this little pandemic was going to last, 3 years or so. Well, I didn't like hearing that. I preferred the message that it would be a short-lived thing. You know, I was willing to give it, a couple weeks. That's what I wanted to hear. But the scientists, perhaps the prophets of our time, warned us that we were in it for the long haul. Jeremiah is warning his audience that it is in it for the long haul. He said to Hananiah, "May the Lord fulfill the words that you have prophesied and bring back to this place from Babylon the vessels of the house of the Lord and all the exiles." May the Lord do that. In other words, I hope you're right. I hope COVID only lasts for a couple weeks. Jeremiah then goes on to say, the real prophets from the past prophesied war and famine and pestilence, the bad and the hard stuff. As for the prophet who prophesies peace, that is you, Hananiah, when the word of the prophet comes true, then it will be known that the Lord has truly sent the prophet. In other words, if what you say comes true, then we'll know that you've been sent by God. Frankly, Jeremiah is saying, I don't think you're right, and prove me wrong. Now, this little prophetic dialogue has me asking, how do we know who is a faithful prophet? To whom should we listen? The prophets of our times are always trying to get our ears. Now, I understand that the real prophets don't tell people what they want to hear, and I get that real prophets often have a tough word to speak. It's going to be 3 years, maybe not 2 weeks. But just because someone speaks something very hard doesn't necessarily make it a word from the Lord. How many of you remember the prophets of doom who spoke, and you have to be at least 20-some years old to remember this, who spoke when we moved into the 21st century? Do you remember those prophets of doom? Oh, the world is going to fall apart. It didn't. Just because someone says, "Thus says the Lord," doesn't make it a word from the Lord. So don't drink the Kool-Aid from every prophetic speaker. Their words have to be tested. To know that a word from a prophet is indeed a word from the Lord requires hard work, the hard work of discernment and on our part. You just cannot swallow every prophetic word that comes down the path. You cannot swallow every word that the prophets say. So, on the one hand, it's all very, very tough. The work of faith is hard work. Whenever you read Paul, you get a sense of the hard work of Christianity, in part because what he has to say is so intellectually thick. I know a lot of you, when you hear Paul's readings, you go, huh? Yeah, whatever you just said. It was beautiful, but I don't have any idea what you said. Paul doesn't make it easy on our brains. In today's reading, dense Paul is addressing his opponents who, oddly enough, are saying that he makes the faith easy. He talks about grace all the time, this new thing that's happened in Jesus, and they conclude that Paul's giving the people an excuse to sin big time. But Paul disagrees. I'm not telling people to go overboard in sinning, he says, so that they get more grace. Really blow it so that you can get more grace. Should we sin because we're not under the law but under grace? Paul says, in very strong words, God forbid, don't even go there. I'm not making it easy. I'm not promoting sin. And here's where Paul gets quite complex, and hang in there long enough with me. And I think not only complex, but phenomenally profound. Sin, he says, is an entanglement. If you think you are free to do whatever you want, you soon find out that that freedom can be misleading and potentially dangerous. Again, some of you are old enough might remember Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan sang many years back, "You gotta serve somebody. In life, you're going to serve somebody. something, you are never fully free. Americans never get this. You are never fully free. It is amazing, absolutely amazing, how quickly freedom becomes an addiction. You hear people say, I can do whatever I want. And we Americans love to say that kind of thing. I can do whatever I want. And then whatever they want becomes the thing they bow down at. It becomes their addiction. It begins to run the show. And all of a sudden, these free people aren't free at all. Paul says we're going to be slaves to one thing or another. And he thinks that sin is a bad slave master. In fact, what it often gets you, he says, is death. That is to say, it doesn't get you what you want. You think doing whatever you want will get you what you want, and Paul says it doesn't often get you what you want. You think it's all about what you want. And what you want often leads you astray, which is why Paul urges you and me to serve obedience and righteousness rather than sin. Righteousness brings life. Righteousness, the fancy word he uses today, righteousness brings us sanctification. What's that mean? I'll put it this way. Righteousness makes you better. I often wonder in my own family life and in church life, can people get better? Because sometimes I see behaviors just repeating themselves over and over and over again. And sometimes I conclude you can't. You must not be able to get better. What Paul says, you can get better when you're serving the right thing. Now, again, that's really hard. That's complex. The word from the Lord as it comes to us through Paul isn't easy. I got to tell you, faith is complex. It's very hard on self-centered lives. But wait a minute. Let's go where Paula went today. Jesus says it's really quite easy. And this is where you experience the tension. It's not a matter of complexity at all. Did you hear what Jesus said today? Whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward. A cup of cold water. How much simpler can you get? Who can make it easier than that? There's no heavy-duty discernment required here. Should I give it to this person or that person or this person? Or is that person worthy or not worthy? Just give the water to whoever needs it. There's no heavy prophetic work here. Should I listen to this one or should I listen to that one? There's no complex theology or psychology. No tough word for self-preoccupied people. There's a simple invitation to provide a simple act of human hospitality. This faith thing, if it is anything, has to do with how we welcome the other in the simplest of ways. And when we welcome the other, something profound happens. Jesus puts it this way: whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. It's a great web. It's all connected. Hospitality toward the other connects us to the very heart of God, because God is primarily hospitable. Here is the simple truth of Christianity. There is hospitality in the universe. There's mercy in the universe. Life is not run by the forces of stinginess and self-preoccupation. Life at its deepest is about abundant compassion and abundant grace. And this is the simple word that we're called to discern. Love is the simple word we're called to discern. It is the simple word of love that begs us and then frees us to live entangled, not in self-preoccupied sin, but in righteousness, what truly makes us and the world better. It's all very, very simple. It's about love. Love that wants to flow through us to others. Love that will become simple acts of kindness. Do you know what you're called to do in life? Well, it is very simple. Practice kindness. Respond to the basic needs of human beings. Open your homes, open your churches, open your hearts to every kind of person and every kind of situation, and then give them a cup of cold water. You can do that. It's not difficult at all. So, which is it? Complexity, hard work, tough discernment? Or is it about ease, a simple message, a simple invitation, simple acts of goodness? Yes. Tension, and I didn't learn this as a child, tension doesn't always have to be a bad thing. It produces beautiful music on the guitar or the violin. And fog, while not something I would recommend for riding bikes in, has a remarkable, mystical majesty. Life, the good life, is always a matter of, on the one hand, this, and on the other hand, that. Don't run from the tension. Yeah, it's going to blow your mind sometimes. It does mine all the time. But it also will make you humble, keeping you on your toes, confounding you, surprising you, taking you to something much larger than your opinions, your formulations, your little neat views of the world. And when that occurs, when the fog settles in and the water saturates you, you indeed may be prepared for a word from the Lord. Amen.